Every story begins with chaos and ends in silence. When the flashing lights fade, when the cameras leave, and the city forgets, someone still has to walk through the door. They're not detectives. They don't solve crimes. They clean up what's left of them. Behind every tragedy in America, there's a quiet hero wearing a mask, a crime scene cleanup technician. They restore what violence destroys. They bring dignity back to the forgotten. And they do it all when no one is watching. This is their story. The story that begins after the tape comes down. This is After the Tape, the untold story of crime scene cleanup technicians.
After the tape, the silence screams 1,000 stories torn at the seams. Under the light where the evidence
In the 1980s, America was bleeding. The skyline glittered, but the streets were cracking. Behind the neon lights and shoulder pads, the nation was in the grip of a quiet war, one that spilled into alleys, apartments, and every flickering headline. The numbers told one story, but the bodies told another. In 1980 alone, more than 23,000 Americans were murdered, a homicide rate nearly double what it is today. Cities like Detroit, Miami, and New York became shorthand for fear. The decade opened with a boom, not of industry, but of violence. Crack cocaine hit the streets like wildfire. It didn't just create addicts, it created economies. Entire neighborhoods were built around a drug that promised heaven but delivered hell. By 1985, the DEA estimated there were 6 million regular cocaine users in the United States. Violent crime skyrocketed. Gang wars erupted from Los Angeles to the Bronx. Drive-bys became a new form of punctuation. For the first responders, the crime scene became a second home. Police documented, paramedics stabilized, coroners examined, and then nothing. When the flashing lights faded, the smell of blood remained. That was the part no one talked about. Families, mothers, fathers, children were left alone in living rooms that would never feel like home again. No one came to clean. No one knew how. In the early 1980s, there was no such thing as a crime scene cleanup technician. It wasn't an industry yet. It wasn't a profession. It was a gap, a deep, unspoken one, in America's growing relationship with death and trauma. The job usually fell to the family. A grieving mother would be given a mop. A landlord would buy bleach in bulk. There was no protocol, no training, no compassion, just silence. But silence doesn't make stains disappear. For every homicide statistic, there was a living room, a bedroom, a kitchen floor, a scene that told a story only the blood could tell. By the mid-1980s, America was beginning to see itself on camera. True crime television was born. America's Most Wanted premiered in 1988, and suddenly the public was fascinated with the chase, the capture, and the courtroom. But no one filmed what happened next. The cleanup, the aftermath. The story was still invisible. The 1980s were also the birth of modern forensics. DNA was discovered as a tool for justice in 1985, revolutionizing investigations. CSI units grew more sophisticated, crime labs more precise, but while detectives hunted evidence, families still faced the same question: who cleans this up? It was around this time, quietly, almost accidentally, that a few individuals began stepping into that void. Not police, not doctors, ordinary people with strong stomachs and soft hearts. Veterans, janitors, nurses, all drawn to something they couldn't quite explain. They started companies out of pickup trucks, armed with bleach, gloves, and empathy. They didn't call themselves technicians, they were just helpers. But they were about to build an industry that would eventually touch tens of thousands of lives. America in the 1980s was obsessed with success. Wall Street was booming, MTV was blaring, but beneath the gloss of prosperity, the murder rate climbed 20% from 1984 to 1991. The homicide rate in New York alone reached 30 per 100,000, staggering by modern standards. Every act of violence left more than a victim. It left a wound in the home, in the psyche, in the space itself. People learned that tragedy wasn't just emotional, it was physical. Blood seeps, odor lingers, and disease can spread. The Centers for Disease Control began issuing quiet warnings about HIV transmission in the mid-1980s, sparking panic. Suddenly, the aftermath of the violent death wasn't just traumatic, it could be dangerous. The era's fear of contamination gave birth to the new awareness: death had a biohazard. If the 1980s were America's descent into urban chaos, they were also the crucible for the compassion. Somewhere between the blood and the bleach, a handful of pioneers saw an opportunity, not for profit, but for purpose. They realized that restoring a home after tragedy wasn't about cleaning. It was about giving people back the right to grieve safely, about removing reminders that would haunt a family forever. They didn't wear capes. They wore Tyvek suits and respirators. They didn't save lives. They restored what was left behind. Back then, there was no regulations, no OSHA standards for trauma cleanup. Technicians learned by trial, by error, and by heartbreak. Some became ill from exposure. Others couldn't take the emotional weight. Imagine cleaning up after a double homicide and then driving home in silence. Imagine eating dinner while replaying the sound of grief from a stranger's hallway. This was the unseen side of America's crime wave. The toll on the ones who cleaned up the mess no one wanted to admit existed. But from that pain came professionalism. By 1988, a few small companies, mostly family-run, began advertising discreetly in phone books. 24-hour trauma cleanup. No questions asked. The industry didn't yet have a name, but it had a mission: restore, respect, and remove. And as crime rates continued to climb into the early 1990s, so did the demand for their work. Crime in the 80s wasn't just violence, it was transformation. The FBI's Uniform Crime Reports documented over 13 million criminal incidents a year by the decade's end, each one a ripple that touched countless others. Behind every report, there was a cleanup, physical, emotional, or both. To understand where America was heading, you had to stand in those rooms, the ones after the detectives left, where the silence screamed louder than the sirens, where the smell of pneumonia and sorrow blended. That's where the modern story of crime scene cleanup truly begins. And as the 1980s closed and America looked toward a new decade, few realized that the mess the nation had made would take far more than laws or prisons to clean. It would take people willing to walk into the darkness and bring light. The 1990s, a decade of contradictions. America had survived the chaos of the 1980s, but not without scars. It was a nation trying to clean itself, from the streets to the soul. But the cleanup wasn't just metaphorical anymore. It was literal. Crime didn't disappear with the new decade. It simply evolved. In 1991, America's violent crime rate hit a historic peak: 758 violent crimes for every 100,000 people. Homicides, assaults, and robberies filled the nightly news. And yet, for the first time, the country was beginning to look directly at its reflection. The 1990s brought the lens. Camcorders, 24-hour news, and the rise of reality TV changed everything. Crime wasn't just something that happened, it was something you watched. From the O.J. Simpson trial to the Menendez brothers, America became obsessed with murder as entertainment. Shows like Unsolved Mysteries and Cops blurred the line between justice and voyeurism. But for every televised case, there were thousands unseen. Quiet tragedies in small towns, apartments, and trailers, invisible to the world, but very real to those left behind. By the early 1990s, those few who had started cleaning crime scenes in the 80s began to realize something. This wasn't just a dirty job, it was a public need, a calling. The crime scene cleanup industry, as it would soon be called, was being born out of necessity and compassion. With every job, these early technicians learned what science and society had not yet written down. They learned how blood seeps through floorboards, how decomposition gas expands walls, how trauma embeds itself not just in fabric, but in air. Cleaning up wasn't just removing evidence, it was restoring peace. And soon, word began to spread. In 1992, Biorecovery Services became one of the first official trauma cleanup companies in the U.S. They weren't the only ones. Similar companies sprouted quietly in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and other places, but they built protocols from scratch.
Hi, I'm Gracie. I'm a 5.5-year supervising technician. Basically, we do anything from your general hoarding, clutter cleanup, cop cars, jail cells, and then we get into the more gruesome side of things when we start doing suicides, unattended deaths, homicides, crime scenes. Basically anything you can think of that has to deal with biohazard, we do. Even if you think it's not a biohazard, in some way, shape, or form, it is, and we still do it as well.
My name is Dakota. I'm a biohazard technician. I guess going off the same thing, we do just about anything from feces to hoarding, cop cars, jail cells, and a lot of suicides, homicides, and so on. Some of the more gruesome ones are generally self-inflicted at the end of them. They'll do a lot of damage and harm to other people, and then they'll harm themselves. We did a triple homicide, and a guy came in and decided that he no longer cared for any of his roommates, and he went out and laid out a thing across his bed of a bunch of different blades, and he just picked and chose which ones he wanted, and he just went through the house and started stabbing everybody that was in the vicinity. Needless to say, there was blood on every square inch of the entire house, from the kitchens to the bathrooms to every single bedroom, all the way up to the front door.
For the first time, the U.S. government recognized the dangers of cleaning up after trauma. It was no longer just about mop and bleach. It was about safety, science, and dignity. The crime rate was still high. Cities like Los Angeles and New York were battling waves of violence and poverty. In 1992, the LA riots left 63 dead and more than 2,300 injured. Cleanup crews worked around the clock, not just on crime scenes, but on entire neighborhoods. The idea of restoration began to mean something bigger than cleaning. It meant rebuilding. And yet, this new breed of technicians still faced the same emotional toll. They saw the worst of humanity in its rawest form. They met mothers who couldn't step foot into their child's room. They stood in homes that reeked of sorrow and disinfecting. They carried every scene home. They learned to put it to the side, to lock the memory of each job behind a mental door and hope it stayed shut. But sometimes it didn't.
Well, one thing about this job is it doesn't matter who you talk to about it. How, like you said, there's people out there all the time that think, oh, that's cool, we can do it. I mean, yeah, us being technicians, don't get me wrong, we have our moments that our job is cool to us because it's what we do for a living. But what people don't see is, how you said, the behind the scenes stuff. I mean, I've probably handled more suicides and more deaths than a lot of people could even comprehend. We actually have seasons that we call them death seasons because there will be weeks where it's a death every other day or a suicide every other day, or you do unattendeds. And when you're in the moment looking at a scene, cleaning it, you're not thinking of that person who you're cleaning. I mean, sometimes, unfortunately, you do see their license, because that's one thing the officers love to do, is they love to put their license down so you get to see the face of the person that you're cleaning. But in other times, you're not thinking about that person. You're just thinking about the situation in front of you. You're thinking about what tools you got, where did the blood go, what are you cleaning, how far you're going to get, what are you going to be there that day, are you going to be there another day? But then behind the scenes, you have the thoughts of the family could be in the house. Their loved one just killed themselves, or their loved one just passed away, or you have the family members that want you to find their personal belongings. So you have to start scrounging through these people's lives. Like we have a lot of customers that say, hey, can you find me their will, or can you find me this ring, or this picture, or this paperwork? And you literally sit there and you go through their entire life, and you feel like you put yourself into that person's shoes. We actually did a job that a gentleman had passed away. He had been dead for about 3 months. So we had to take everything out of the unit. It was petrified, as we call it, with smell and bugs, and we had to take everything out of the unit. This man was an 18-year naval officer, retired, and he had medals, trophies, awards. There was pictures of family members everywhere. There was letters to ex-wife, to the brother, to family. Family didn't want any of it. Literally did not want a single thing of it. And one thing that insurance has you do is, when a family member doesn't want their belongings, you have to inventory it, which means I had to sit through this man's 3-bed, 2-bath house, going through his entire life, that he's lived in that house for 18 years, going through everything, including AA passages, service, mental health notes to himself, to his apology letters to his family. You literally put your shoes into that person's life. And yeah, most people think, oh, your job's cool, I can do it, but you don't realize, that does hit home. We all have our own traumas, we all have our own issues in our life, and sometimes those little things, even reading stuff like that, can be like a trigger. It make you think of, like how Cody said, cleaning up the 13-year-old boy, and then you think about our kids. These jobs can be triggers to us as well. But we're not like most people who, you go home at the end of the day, you talk to your spouse about, oh, my day was awesome, or my day was crap, or, Karen in the stall behind me was just sucked. We don't get to do that. We have to keep our composure, not only for ourselves, because we can't let it hit us. It's our job. And we also can't let us hit us on job sites, because we're dealing with the family. The last thing a family member wants to see is that you're traumatized by it, that you can't handle what you're doing.
A technician in Chicago once described his work like this: "We clean everything the world pretends not to see." That became the unofficial motto of the decade. The news cycle was filled with names that would define a generation: Dahmer, Waco, Columbine, and Oklahoma City. Every event left behind devastation that couldn't be captured in headlines. After the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, where 168 lives were lost, the cleanup required more than 500 specialists. It was one of the first time the public realized that after tragedy, there's another silent response: those who make spaces safe again. By the mid-1990s, the trauma cleanup industry was formalizing. Training programs began to appear, regulations for waste disposal tightened, the EPA, OSHA, and CDC all issued new guidelines for handling blood. The people once seen as janitors were now recognized as technicians, professionals in an essential and haunting trade.
It does get pretty gruesome. You come in and you see somebody's stomach innards just piled up on the floor. And yeah, sometimes it does hit you. You get through it and you just, go keep doing what you gotta do. You know, somebody's gotta do it. Does get pretty gruesome sometimes, for sure. I say out of all the ones I've been through a lot of adults, you know, homicides, suicides, unattendeds, and the worst ones are the younger ones. Got called in at midnight to go clean up a 13-year-old boy. Wasn't just, maybe just needed a hug. You never really know. He just needed something, and apparently he wasn't getting it. So he helped himself to his dad's 9mm, went into the bathroom, and ended his life. The police had to break the door down, and we had to clean up a lot of brain matter all throughout the bathroom. Gets pretty intense, for sure. And that was kind of a home hitter for me. My daughter's, you know, a couple years younger, and just even out of all the ones I've been through, that was definitely one of the hardest. Well, not nearly as gruesome as some of the ones I've been to, but it's just you know, young people, they don't need that. So it's.
Do you feel like the stories behind the scenes hit you harder than the actual visuals itself? Than walking in and seeing these horrific sights, but just knowing the backstory of it, you think that's a lot more brutal than the actual blood and gore itself?
Most indefinitely. When I first got to that site, for example, I was in there, I was cleaning, got right to work, cleaning up everything, and by the time I was already majority of the way through all the brain matter and got everything just about cleaned up, and it was talking to the dad that really hit me. Like after cleaning it up, that was just another day's work, but when I talked to the dad and just hearing him say his little bit and thanking me so much and then some, and it almost put me at a loss for words. You know, I was trying to watch every single thing that came out of my mouth because I didn't want to say the wrong thing or say too much, not say enough, you know, and that's when it really hit me. And by the time it was all said and done and I was outside and it was 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were having to leave because we were trying to let the family get some sleep, and then we had to come back and finish up. And that was definitely one of the hardest moments because it was like, as I was walking out, you know, he was like, "Thank you guys so much. You have a great night." And the only thing I could think of was, I hope you guys can get through this.
By 1997, more than 300 small trauma cleanup businesses existed across the country. Some were mom and pop operations, others began franchising. Companies like Biomanagement Northwest, founded in the mid-90s, helped shape the industry's national identity. For many, it wasn't about the money. The average cleanup technician earned less than $30,000 a year. But the work gave meaning, a kind of service that existed between death and healing. It was also a time of cultural reflection. True crime was exploding. Books like Helter Skelter and movies like Seven and Silence of the Lambs captivated audiences. The fascination with death was now mainstream. And yet, for all the talk of killers, no one talked about cleaners, the unsung professionals who faced what remained. And yet, for all the talk of killers, no one talked about cleaners, the unsung professionals who faced what remained after every murder, suicide, and tragedy. They weren't part of the show. They were the ones who erased the stage.
You start crying, it's going to make somebody else start crying. I mean, every so often you get the family members that you start to wonder if they're crazier than you because, you know, they're happy about the situation. But for the most part, you know, you can't have that emotion like most people get to have. And it does eat at us slowly as well. I mean, like I said, I've been doing this 5.5 years, and you start to, certain jobs are more or less triggers than others, but eventually it does weigh on you, even if you don't talk about it, even if you don't see it in that person, it does weigh down a lot. And this job isn't just about the weight of dealing with other people's traumas and all these scenes, it's also the weight of our own. I mean, being a biohazard technician, you're on call 24/7. Like how Cody said, getting a job at midnight, getting a cop car or jail cell. It does not matter what time that phone call comes in, you have a 15-minute response time. So we don't get to be like normal people, and we don't get to take, these fun vacations out of town or schedule a day off because, we have appointments. There's times where we can be in an appointment and we have to walk out because we just have that job. We have that call, unfortunately. So it's also the weight of our own personal lives getting to us, not just other people's personal lives. And eventually, we have our own families, and it starts to weigh on us and our kids. And sometimes, we'll sit here and we'll be like, hey, let's get some more work. We need more work. We want something to happen. And then other times we're so jam-packed we can't even keep up. And that's when you start to wonder, like, what's going on sometimes? Like I said, we have our death week, and it actually just happened probably about not even 3 months ago. We had 10 deaths in 2 weeks. That does not generally happen. Generally, we have a death month or a death 2 weeks, but then you just get so busy back to back, you start to wonder, what's going on in the world. So you don't even have time to think about your own life and having that time for yourself and making sure your own mental state is okay, let alone, because all you're thinking about is the mental state of other people. So sometimes, the weight carries more than people see. We do have the few jobs, like I said, that clients, customers, surprisingly are actually happy about situations. We actually just did one 2 weeks ago. Gentleman actually killed himself. It was the son of the homeowner. He was downstairs. He did one attempt, didn't work, so he tried it again, and he actually videotaped himself doing it. He had numerous suicide notes throughout the room. I had to be the one to unfortunately hand them the suicide notes. I had to walk them through the room of, here's where the first attempt happened. This is what it looks like in the second and final attempt. And most people that walk in those scenes, they don't want to see it. They don't want to hear it. Even because unfortunately, if I'm in a scene and the blood travels farther, or jumps as we call it, I got to keep cutting, which means I got to take out more of this person's house. And that's kind of the last thing they want to hear when they think about a loved one that just passed away or died. But unfortunately, you have to give that bad news. Well, this family was surprisingly happy about it. Was surprisingly actually, I told them, hey, this is where it happened. This is the first attempt. And I told them, I was like, we're gonna have to take this, and we're gonna have to take this, and I gotta take that. And they were actually surprisingly happy. The more stuff that we took, the happier they got. It's very rare, but it happens. And then jobs kind of like the 13-year-old boy suicide, that was one where you look at a scene and you never really think, oh, here's this pool of blood, here's the brain matter. It's not that bad. Small pool, not going to be that bad. And then it gets into a crease of a wall, or into the subfloor, or into a support beam, a joist, and then it travels and it just keeps flowing with the actual flow of the wood down the house. So then you have to cut out more. This particular job, we actually had to basically gut the entire bathroom. And that was a moment where, I have to go talk to the father of the boy that just killed himself, and I have to tell him, hey, I have to destroy your bathroom. And it's not fun because, you have to have that conversation with them, but you also gotta, hold their composure as they're crying. Because you can't cry, you can't show that emotion. And
a cleanup scene in the 1990s was different than today. There were no high-tech disinfectants, no air scrubbers, no specialized enzymatic solutions, just determination, elbow grease, and heart. Crews often worked in silence. Sometimes they prayed, sometimes they cried. and sometimes they just focused on scrubbing, because if they stopped, the weight of it might crush them. But amidst the darkness, there were stories of light. A technician in Texas helped clean a family's home after a son's suicide. Months later, the mother sent him a letter. It said, "You gave me my home back. You gave me permission to heal." That letter was taped to the wall of his van for years. A reminder that this wasn't a job about death. It was about what comes after. In many ways, the 1990s were about America facing its own mess. Crime rates began to decline toward the decade's end, thanks to better policing, community programs, and shifting economics. By 1999, the homicide rate had fallen to nearly half of its early decade peak. But while the country celebrated progress, the cleanup industry was just finding its voice. It began a regulated, respected, and deeply necessary profession. By the turn of the millennium, crime scene cleanup was not just an oddity, it was a business worth over $150 million annually. It was no longer about bleach and gloves. It was about compassion, compliance, and care. The technicians of the 1990s were pioneers. They faced horrors few could imagine, and they did it without recognition.
Nobody's gonna have a good night in that situation, so it was definitely that's after I even said that, that's when it really hit me after I left, and it was like, I don't know if I said the right words or, like what, and then everything just started playing in my head of like, what if that was me? What if I was in that situation? That was what really hit home.
Well, you're stepping into a scene that literally 99% of all people won't ever see in their entire life.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking to people that people will never talk to in their life in those kind of situations. We only watch that kind of stuff on TV.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a realistic thought for most of us in reality. You guys see it all the time.
It's definitely not something they show on the news by any means either, so
Exactly.
You never actually hear about those kind of situations.
But they're not realizing there's another side to this.
Yeah,
It's a
the
little
dark
tougher.
side that most people don't even want to talk about.
An industry founded on empathy, because what they understood better than anyone was that healing isn't just emotional, it's environmental. You can't move forward until the stains are gone. By the time the 1990s ended, crime in America had changed. The streets were safer, but the trauma hadn't disappeared. It had just gone indoors. Behind closed doors, new tragedies were waiting. Domestic violence, addiction, and the quiet epidemic of suicide. And as a new millennium dawned, those who cleaned the crime scenes would soon find themselves called to something even greater. Disaster, the kind of cleanup that defined not just homes, but history itself. The year 2000s, the new millennium arrived with optimism. Y2K came and went without catastrophe. The economy was booming, technology was connecting the world, and America believed its darkest days might be behind it. But on a clear September morning in 2001, everything changed. 9/11, two numbers that would redefine what crime scene meant. When the towers fell, so did the illusion of safety. The scale of destruction was unlike anything modern America had ever witnessed. At ground zero, over 1.8 million tons of debris lay piled across 16 acres. The air itself became toxic, a cloud of pulverized concrete, glass, and asbestos, and grief. More than 3,000 people were killed in the attack, and thousands more would later suffer from the toxic exposure. But after the rescue efforts, after the cameras left, a different kind of cleanup began. One measured not in days, but in years. Hazmat teams, environmental engineers, and newly trained trauma cleanup specialists descended into the wreckage. Their mission was daunting, not only to clear the rubble, but to recover remains, preserve evidence, and restore the city's heartbeat. For many in the cleanup field, 9/11 was a turning point. It proved that their work wasn't just about crime. It was about catastrophe. It was about healing a landscape. Before 9/11, most Americans didn't know what biohazard remediation meant. After 9/11, they began to understand. Every disaster leaves a residue, both physical and psychological.
So we're walking into a crime scene. And we'll be told it's one thing, but you do this for so many years, you start to pick up on what is what. Did it actually happen? Is this the scene that happened, or is it something else? Did it get staged? And there's been quite a few that we have definitely questioned whether or not, did this person take their own life or was it taken? So you see a lot of crazy things in this industry. And me being the supervising technician for the last 5.5 years, I get to share my experiences with a lot of my newer guys. I get to show them what I know. It's a learning curve. This job, I can only tell you so much. You can only see videos, but hands-on learning is the best way to put it. Every scene is different. You never get the same thing. Even if you think, it's a suicide in a bathroom or it's an unattended death on a couch, you can think it's gonna be like any other job that you've done before. Nope, never is. Nothing is ever the same. I think the only thing that we can guarantee on is when one of our officers call us and says, hey, I got a jail cell for you. At least then we know we're just swimming in poop all day. And those are the fun ones. Like this guy, I'll have him go into detail more on this job, but we actually did it was actually the owners of a very big company, very well-known company. We had to do a sewage cleanup because their sewer line underneath the house decided to burst. It had 3 holes in it. So the first day that we were there, I pumped out 183 gallons of raw sewage from underneath this person's house, literally swimming in it. And then the next few days, as I'm on another site, him and 2 other technicians took over and they got to be in the fun sewage part. Explain that one.
Yeah, that was pretty gross and gnarly, I'm not gonna lie. You got a couple 100 gallons of sewage water under a house built up and it just seeps through the dirt.
Which black dirt, by the way, underneath the crawl space, especially in mud, it's what's called a cesspool if it's been sitting for so long.
Needless to say, me and a coworker of mine had to scrape through and dig and through like 4 tons of raw cesspool, just chunkiness. We had to scrape it all out, scoop it all out, bag it up, carry it through the house because their only entrance into the basement was through their bedroom, through their closet, and down through the hole. So we had to bag it up, take it out, I'm gonna say like a few hundred bags at least, 4 tons. And we had to carry it through the house, and that right there was one of the most interesting jobs for sure. Scooping that much junk out of there was pretty eye-opening, to say the least.
By 2003, the biorecovery industry had doubled in size. Organizations like Northwest Biomanagement began formalizing training in ethical standards. Cleanup was no longer just trade, it was science. Technicians were taught to measure air particulates and document chain of custody for biohazard waste. The work became safer, more technical, but never less human. The 2000s were also a decade of trauma on every level. Mass shootings, domestic terror, the wars overseas. Violence was evolving, and with it came a new psychological aftershock that rippled through American homes. The Virginia Tech shooting in 2007 left 32 dead, one of the deadliest in U.S. history. Cleanup crews spent days sanitizing dorms and classrooms, working in silence among the walls still echoing with pain. They weren't just removing blood, they were erasing the visual memory of horror.
It was actually this last Valentine's Day. We unfortunately had a suicide cleanup on Valentine's, which goes again in, going back to what I said, biotechnicians, they don't get a day off, including a holiday, unfortunately.
24/7, 65.
So Valentine's Day, we get called out to go do this suicide. It's upstairs. The husband decided to take his life in front of his wife. on Valentine's Day. Well, I get there, I assess the scene, I explain to the daughter of the deceased what we're gonna do, how we're gonna clean it up. I'm walking into the room, I'm taking pictures of my scene, and then the wife who actually witnessed it came in and she freaked out. She started screaming and yelling at us about how she needed to be a part of it. She wanted to be there. She wanted to see it, wanted to watch us work. I explained to her the reason I didn't have her do the walkthrough with me. I didn't want her to see, she's already seen enough. I didn't want her to see more. So I tried to explain that to her and she just was not having it. She was very pissed off that we didn't want to involve her in it. So finally I had to have one of the family members come in and grab her out.
What are some safety protocols and like equipment that are essential to what you guys do, stuff like that? So like, how does that stuff work for people at home? Like, when you guys show up, you have to be in your suits.
Yep.
You gotta have your mask, right? Yep. And so you go in there, and then other than that, like, what kind of tools do you guys use and stuff like that? I mean, you don't have to get too detailed, but there's a lot of scrubbing. You were talking about cutting stuff up. I don't know if people really understand. I personally thought you guys went in there, wiped some stuff up, all the bad stuff, and then, we're on your way. I didn't realize that you guys were literally like a restoration company that are like cutting floorboards and stuff out. That my brain didn't go that deep into it,
Yeah, so I mean, generally speaking, like how you said, a lot of people don't realize just how many tools we use.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were to look on one of our trucks, it'd basically be like looking at a construction company's truck, pretty much. Most of the time, unfortunately, it does happen where, blood or bodily fluids, they get onto carpet, which goes into subfloor, which goes onto beams, which goes under flex plates of actual doorways. So when a situation like that happens, you have your standard PPE, as everybody calls it. So you have your booties, your suits, your full face masks, your half masks, your N95s, your gloves. And then you get into homeless camps where you have puncture-proof gloves and you have claps so you don't have to deal with needles. And then death jobs, we have our basic power tools. I mean, we're gonna have, drills, sawzalls, sanders, encapsulations, as we call it. Because, we do a lot of subfloor cutout. And, I mean, most people would think, oh, you're cutting boards, use a skill saw. No, don't use a skill saw. You hit a support beam, that's pretty much like the end of your job right there if you hit a support beam. Even a flex plate in a doorway, can't cut that out either. So that requires a lot of maneuvering and encapsulating, and basically you got to take the subfloor from the flex plate, but you cannot cut it. You can't cut the subfloor, you can't cut the flex plate. So we have a few different methods on how we take that out.
Statistically, violent crime had declined sharply from its 1990s peak, but the crimes that did occur were often more shocking, more public, and more devastating. During this decade, new challenges emerged: meth labs, hoarding, and biocontamination. Methamphetamine use exploded across rural America, leading to tens of thousands of toxic home labs. Cleanup teams had to learn chemistry overnight, how to neutralize acid burns, decontaminate ventilation systems, and make homes habitable again. By 2005, more than 12,000 meth lab incidents were reported annually in the U.S. Each one required professional decontamination before families could safely return. Crime scene cleanup had officially merged with environmental restoration. And yet, despite their growing importance, these technicians remained invisible to most Americans. They were the ghost in the aftermath, anonymous, quiet, and unthanked. A 2006 industry survey found that over 60% of technicians experienced symptoms of secondary trauma, including nightmares, anxiety, and burnout. Many struggled to explain their work to their friends or spouses. "You clean up what?" they asked. They would smile politely, then change the subject. But among themselves, they understood there was a code, an unspoken bond forged in bleach and compassion. Because only those who had walked into a room still heavy with grief could truly understand what it meant to clean it.
A few different methods on how we take that out.
Our job requires precision more so than anything, I guess is what she's trying to get at. You can't take too much, and we try not to take as less as we possibly can, so that we're not doing more damage than needs to be. So like we have to work our way out slowly, not just go in and start taking out a whole floor and working our way in. We gotta pretty much just keep moving our way out until we get to the end of the trail. And then, you're following the trail is basically what you're doing. Each job's different, so you're just following the trail of whatever scene you're at, and you're just moving your way out until it stops. And then we go a little bit past that just to clear it all up. And then at that point, most of our job is cutting everything out. We get to do the cleanup afterward, but a lot of it is, you're cutting the floors out, cutting the walls out, and then you're wiping down after you've already removed most of the bio at that point.
Some found meaning in helping families move forward. Others found purpose in meticulous precision, scrubbing, sanitizing, sealing. Every technician had their own ritual, their way of honoring the space. That's what the job really was, restoring the right to peace. In 2008, the Great Recession hit. Foreclosures rose, poverty deepened, and with them came new kinds of cleanup scenes. Abandoned homes, suicides born from financial despair, lonely deaths discovered weeks later. The industry shifted again. Cleanup companies found themselves not only responding to crime, to crisis, mental health, addiction, and neglect. By 2010, suicide had become the 10th leading cause of death in America. Technicians were not as likely to clean up after the self-inflicted tragedy as after violence from others. The job's emotional weight grew heavier, but so did its purpose. Training evolved too. Companies began offering psychological preparedness workshops, teaching employees how to detach, how to respect grief without absorbing it. The phrase compassion fatigue entered their vocabulary, and so did the understanding that even those who clean must be cleaned of what they carry. The 2000s weren't all darkness. They also marked the rise of professionalism and pride within the cleanup world. Technicians began documenting their experiences, writing blogs, giving interviews, even appearing on early documentary programs. For the first time, America started to glimpse the human side of hazmat, the empathy behind the goggles. And while Hollywood kept telling stories about killers, the quiet truth was being lived by the ones who followed after, the ones who made homes livable, who showed up when no one else could. By the end of the decade, the crime scene cleanup industry was valued at over $350 million annually. Companies began specializing in trauma, unattended death, biohazard, even hoarder remediation. Each specialization carried its own science, its own soul. But for all the structure and growth, one thing remained unchanged: the human heart behind it. The willingness to walk through the unthinkable and leave it better than you found it. When we talk about the 2000s, we remember the towers, the storms, the wars. But somewhere beneath the headlines were men and women in white suits, kneeling on broken tiles, whispering to themselves, "Let's make this clean again." That is where the story of American resilience truly lives, not just in the rebuilding, but in the quiet restoration. And as the decade faded into the 2010s, new storms gathered: opioid overdoses, mass shootings, and a new wave of trauma that tested the endurance of every community and every technician.
On meth remediations, we don't do cutouts. Generally speaking, we don't do cutouts. Every now and then there are a few that we will, but generally we're electricians on those jobs, because when we do meth contaminations, we have to take out all of the outlets, all the light fixtures, all the heater vents. We have to clean the whole entire HVAC system. I have to take out your kitchen stove. I have to take out your bath fan. So basically, I'm just an electrician all day. There are jobs where, like that suicide, where we had to take out most of the bathroom. So on that job, we became plumbers. not just contractors. So basically a biohazard technician will do basically everything. Yeah, basically anything a general contractor would do, we do with a lot more extensive work because, you know, we're going around bodily fluids. So we have to be very careful. Like if I'm cutting out a tub, say there's a situation in a bathroom where I got to cut the tub out, I can't nick those water lines. So I basically, what we call it playing surgeon. We do surgery on the bathrooms basically because they don't want you can't take the water lines out, but you can't cut them. You can't cut any electrical that's behind the drywall. But generally our most used tools on any job is going to be your standard drill, pliers, sawzall, Dremel, and sander. Those are our main 5 tools. Oh, and breaker bars because, you know, we pull a lot of carpet. Crap ton of carpet, so.
So,
Yeah.
how many people are usually on scene? How many of you are there?
It depends on how big the scene is, but generally speaking, we got about 4 right now, anywhere from 4 to 6, depending on how big the job is. Lately, our jobs have been pretty small, so we've been doing teams of 2 on everything, or teams of 3 if I really need it. But generally speaking, I try not to, because unless the job warrants 6 people, it's too much, you know. I can't be in a bathroom and have 6 people, you know. I won't have room to move. I can't even have 3 people in a bathroom. So if it's like a whole house situation, I'll put 6 people. If it's a 1 room to maybe 2 rooms, I'll do 2 or 3. Now, if we ever get another meth motel, I'm probably gonna have 8, maybe more, 8 to 12 people, depending on the size of that job. But it's actually been a while since we've done a meth motel. Those are the not so fun ones.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Oh yeah, definitely.
How long usually before they're gone? Because I think some people at home were like picturing you guys walking into these places and there's still body laying. I don't know if people realize, like, what's the amount of time usually on average? Do they get rid of it and call you the same day? Do they come and grab it and then call you the same day, or is it usually that week, or like how does that work?
Generally speaking, we go in the day of or the day after. We did actually have one very weird situation one time where the lady, I called her, we got a death cleanup. I called her, I said, hey, we're on our way, we'll be there in so and so hours. You know, I got me and my crew coming. She said, okay, yeah, no problem. I get to the job, body's still sitting there. She was like, oh, you guys don't take the body? No, I don't take the body, but that was not what I was expecting. And it's literally just, the body's just laying there. I'm like, you didn't call the sheriff or the coroner? She's like, no, I thought you guys took the body.
They should call him the cleaner.
So unfortunately, I had to be the one to call the sheriff on that one because I was like, did I just walk into a really bad situation here? Like, you paying me in cash right now?
Because when tragedy becomes routine, someone has to be strong enough to face it again and again. And in that repetition, that relentless return to sorrow, crime scene cleanup technicians found their deepest calling. Not to erase the past, but to make room for tomorrow. The modern era, the new front line of compassion. By the time the 2010s arrived, the world had changed, but death had not. The streets were cleaner, technology was sharper, and crimes were now caught on more cameras than ever before. But violence had simply learned to wear new faces. Each new decade brought its own brand of heartbreak. And in the quiet after every tragedy, a new kind of responder stepped forward, again and again. Not police, not paramedics, but the people who came after the tape. They were the calm after the chaos, the crime scene cleanup technicians. The cleanup industry, once underground, unregulated, and misunderstood, had evolved into a profession built on science, empathy, and service. By 2020, there were more than 1,500 biohazard remediation companies operating across the United States, serving every kind of scene imaginable. Each technician carried certifications in OSHA compliance, bloodborne pathogen handling, and hazardous waste transport. But what mattered most couldn't be taught in a classroom. Compassion. Every cleanup is different, not just in scope, but in story. One technician might spend a morning restoring a home where a lonely veteran took his life. That same afternoon, they might be sent to a family's kitchen where a domestic dispute turned deadly. And still, by sunset, they'll walk out quietly, leaving behind no trace that death ever happened there. Because that's their mission. Restore the scene, restore the dignity, restore the peace. In the modern world, we scroll past tragedy every day through screens, headlines, and breaking news alerts. But for those who clean up what's left behind, the experience is deeply personal. Crime scene cleanup technicians step into spaces frozen in the most painful moments of someone's life. They see what no one else can bear to look at. Yet, they're not there for the crime. They're there for the living.
The last thing I will say is we do a lot of jobs after other companies or family members think that they can do this. Please don't take what we say and think that if you have a really bad traumatic scene that you can do it now that you know the power tools and kind of how we do it. Don't think you can, because I guarantee if you have not been doing this for a while, it's not going to work out in your favor. You'll probably still end up calling us no matter what. So when in doubt, always just call a biohazard company. I mean, if it's a small spot, go ahead. But if it's a big spot, please just give us a call. That's all I gotta say.
They sanitize for the landlords who were too heartbroken to open the door. They restore the homes of people who have lost everything but memories. And through it all, they listen. Many technicians say that half their job isn't cleaning, it's comforting. A hand on a shoulder, a quiet, "I'm sorry for your loss," a promise that they'll make it right. Because what they remove from the home isn't just blood or debris, it's trauma. The 21st century has turned crime scene cleanup into an exact science. Technicians wear fully sealed PPE suits, filtered respirators, and double-layered gloves. They use ATP meters to detect microscopic traces of biological matter, ensuring nothing harmful remains. Ozone generators eliminate airborne pathogens, and every item is removed. Every carpet, every wall panel, and every air vent is cataloged, bagged, and disposed of under EPA and OSHA standards. But even with all this precision, the work still demands humanity, because no piece of technology can erase grief. There's a hidden cost to this work, one that people will never talk about. Studies show that over 60% of cleanup technicians experience reoccurring trauma-related dreams after handling severe scenes. Roughly 40% leave the industry within 5 years, not because they can't handle the physical work, but because of what it does to their heart. Yet those who stay, the veterans of the field, say they've learned something sacred about humanity. They say every scene reminds them of how fragile life is, how fast everything can change, and how healing can take the shape of something as simple as scrubbing a floor, repainting a wall, or airing out a room filled with memories. Many describe the job as ministry of disguise. Not religious, but spiritual, a calling to restore hope in places where it died. Today, cleanup technicians are part of America's hidden emergency services, rarely seen, rarely acknowledged, yet very essential. When the last police car leaves, when the media packs up, when the families can't bear to step foot inside, that's when they arrive. And they don't just clean. In every city, on every street, they're out there, in unmarked vans, wearing white suits, moving through the silence that follows the chaos. The United States still struggles with violence. In 2022 alone, there were over 21,000 homicides, a rate far higher than the most developed nations. Mass shootings, suicides, and overdoses now make up the majority of biohazard scenes nationwide. But alongside the darkness, something else has grown: understanding. More first responders now rely on cleanup crews to protect their health and safety. And more technicians are finding purpose in the pain, turning a job into a mission. Because in a world obsessed with how people die, there are still those dedicated to how we go on living. The modern crime scene cleanup technician isn't a janitor. They're not a background worker. They're the caretakers of closure, the bridge between chaos and calm. When the sirens fade, when the cameras turn off, when the story ends, the real heroes begin their work. Next, in our final chapter, we'll explore the soul of the profession, the people behind the mask, their struggles, and the moments that change them forever. Because even in the darkest rooms, there's always someone who shows up to bring back the light. There's a moment after every tragedy that few ever see. No flashing lights, no reporters, no chaos. Just silence that feels heavy, too heavy for the air to hold. And in that silence, a van pulls up. Few people step out. They don't carry weapons or badges, but what they bring might be even more powerful. Compassion. They're the healers of the aftermath, the guardians of what remains, the crime scene cleanup technicians. To most, they're anonymous, hidden behind respirators and Tyvek suits. But beneath the mask are people, real people, who carry the weight of every story they enter. Some are former nurses or EMTs, drawn back to the service after losing someone themselves. Others are veterans, finding purpose and structure, discipline, and restoration. And some simply stumbled into the work, never realizing it would change their lives. Ask them why they do it, and you'll hear answers like, because someone has to, because families shouldn't have to see what I see, or because I can handle it and they can't. Behind every cleanup, there's a quiet act of mercy. It's easy to imagine the job as mechanical, methodical, detached, but that's a myth. Every technician has a scene that stays with them, the one that broke their composure, the one that made them step outside, remove the mask, and take a deep breath that didn't help. For one, it was a child's room, toys still arranged for a birthday that would never happen. For another, it was a veteran who had lost his battle with the ghost of war. For another, it was cleaning a home where a neighbor, someone they'd waved at every morning, had died alone and wasn't found for weeks. They'll tell you they don't cry on sight. They hold it together until the job is done. But later, in their trucks, at home, sometimes months after, the emotions catch up. And still, the next day, they go back. Because for them, it's not about death, it's about dignity. The toll of empathy is a quiet one. There's no medal for emotional endurance, no ceremony for thousands of scenes that end without applause. Studies show that 1 in 3 cleanup technicians eventually experience compassion fatigue, the slow burnout that comes from witnessing constant suffering. But when asked if they quit, most simply shake their heads. Why stop? Who's going to help them? Many find support in one another. Informal brotherhoods and sisterhoods formed not in barracks or hospitals, but in vans parked outside unthinkable scenes. They check on each other. They share dark humor to cope. They talk about the importance of therapy, faith, and family, because if they don't take care of themselves, they can't take care of anyone else. Every cleanup begins with a knock on the door, and often it's met by someone broken, a mother who can't stop shaking, a husband who hasn't slept in days, a landlord who can't step past the doorway. Cleanup technicians know the job starts long before the first wipe of disinfectant. It starts with a conversation, a look, a word, and a promise. They listen. They let the family talk, cry, remember. Sometimes that's what truly restores the home. Because what they're really cleaning isn't just blood or decay. It's the trauma. It's the invisible residue of grief that lingers in every room. From the crack-fueled chaos of the 1980s to the forensic boom of the 1990s, the psychological awareness of the 2000s and beyond, America evolved. In America, a violent crime occurs roughly every 24 seconds, one suicide every 11 minutes. And every time, somewhere, someone is called to clean up the aftermath. But here's the number that matters the most. 100% of those scenes are handled by people, not robots, not machines, human beings, fragile, flawed, and full of heart. Every bloodstain tells a story of what went wrong, but every technician tells a story of what could still go right. It's easy to think of their work as all tragedy, but ask them what they remember most, and you'll hear something surprising. They'll tell you about the families who hugged them, the thank you letters left on kitchen counters. They'll tell you about laughter that someone returned to a house after weeks of silence, about the strange peace that settles in once everything is clean, about the sunsets they drive home to, tired, drained, but proud. Because for them, every cleanup ends the same way, with one final check, one deep breath, one quiet nod, knowing they've done something that truly mattered. History remembers detectives, prosecutors, and reporters. But the cleanup crews, they're the invisible ones. No spotlight, no recognition, just long nights and hard work. Yet in many ways, their contribution is the purest form of service, because they expect nothing in return. They show up when the story is over and give it a humane ending. At the end of every shift, there's always one more scene, because tomorrow, they'll start again. Another home, another story, another chance to heal. Some listen to music as they drive away. Some drive in silence, letting the day fade behind them. And some pray. And though the job never gets easier, they keep showing up, because they know what few others do, that even in the darkest places, there's work worth doing. When the headlines are forgotten and the pain begins to dull, that's when the quiet work of the healing continues. The crime scene cleanup technician stands at the threshold between the end and the beginning, where death is past, but life still remains. They are the last responders, the caretakers of closure, the custodies of compassion. And though their work may go unseen, its impact echoes through every home they touch. Because what they restore isn't just cleanliness, it's peace. And peace is priceless. This is their story, the story of a nation that has seen too much violence, and the quiet heroes who choose every day to face it, so others don't have to. After the tape comes down, after the noise fades, they are the ones who bring the light back in, because healing always starts with someone willing to walk into the dark. Thanks for watching.